I knew when I was there, this was hell. The silence is deafening. They will shoot you with a regular bullet. No questions asked. I will guarantee you every single person in the ADX Supermax would do anything to trade with Guantanamo Bay.
I don't know what hell is, but I do know that the assumption would be for a free person, would be pretty close to it.
Everybody knows Joaquin Guzman Loerda, aka El Chapo, as this notorious lord who had all the luxuries of the world at his feet. And while he may have been all that once upon a time, his time in jail isn't nearly as grand. In fact, the Mexican kingpin has it pretty hard at the most secure prison in the whole world. And in today's video, we're here to tell you all about El Chapo's tragic life behind bars. So, who is El Chapo Guzman? Why are such high measures being undertaken to make sure he stays put? What did he do to deserve this treatment? Was it really all that bad? Well, let me tell you. Everybody who lived through the 80s and 90s would probably shudder at the name of Guzman. With a net worth of $1 billion, the Mexican cartel boss is known as one of the most terrifying crime bosses in the history of the world. At the peak of his crime, El Chapo's cartel was bringing in $3 billion per year. He made so much money that at one point, he owned a couple of yachts, a fleet of Learjets, and a private zoo with tigers, crocodiles, and panthers. His fortune was so vast that he was named in the Forbes annual list of billionaires 4 times.
In 2008, Mexican and Colombian traffickers laundered between $18 billion and $39 billion in proceeds from wholesale shipments to the U.S., according to the U.S. government. Guzman and his operation likely grossed 20% of that, enough for him to have pocketed $1 billion over his career and earn a spot on the billionaires list for the first time.
With all that money came so many more luxuries. He even had a diamond-encrusted pistol. He carried this everywhere with him. It reportedly cost a whopping $50,000. El Chapo boasted about his obsession with guns all the time, from his bazookas to AK-47s, but this blinged out .38 caliber pistol was his most favorite. It even had his initials engraved on it. Also, his cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, is rumored to have more airplanes in its private jet fleet than the Mexican National Airlines. Between 2009 and 2015, the Mexican government seized 599 aircrafts from the cartel, 586 planes, and 13 helicopters. And it didn't just come out of nowhere. It was a long road to the top for El Chapo. Joaquin Guzman Loerda grew up poor in Sinaloa State on Mexico's Pacific coast. He started selling oranges to make a living before his uncle introduced him to the substance business.
Desgraciadamente, como le comento, por donde yo me crié, pues no había otra manera ni hay de sobrevivir y pues.
So from very early on, a criminal life was the way. In an exclusive interview with the American actor Sean Penn, El Chapo talked about his childhood.
Quiero dejar en claro el contenido de esta entrevista es exclusivo y el señor Sean Penn.
He remembered that he came from a very humble background. His mother made bread to support the family. The family grew corn and beans. He said he took care of his grandmother's cattle and chopped wood. But at the age of 15, he began to grow marijuana. With time, that turned into a business. Then, he was recruited by the Guadalajara cartel boss, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, known as the godfather of the modern Mexican cartels. After Felix Gallardo was arrested in 1989, Guzman's Sinaloa cartel began its rise. Very quickly, El Chapo rose through the ranks of the Sinaloa cartel. He rose to power funneling substance through Mexico as the United States put its attention elsewhere and cracked down on substance shipments through the Caribbean. Guzman's cartel trafficked coke, heroin, marijuana, and meth. But with so much power came enemies as well. Rival traffickers placed a target on his back. He survived an assassination attempt in 1993 when a Catholic cardinal, Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, was killed in the shooting after being mistaken for Guzman. El Chapo fled to Guatemala, but he was caught after a massive manhunt. He was transferred to a maximum security prison in Amaloyo de Juarez in Mexico. The kingpin was sentenced to prison for 20 years, but he wouldn't stay there for that long. During his time in Puente Grande, where he was transferred 2 years after getting caught, El Chapo enjoyed a lavish lifestyle. He had most of the people working there under his payroll. He could wish to have pretty much anything he wanted, and it would be granted. But most importantly, he continued his business through the phone. Then came the fear of being extradited to the United States for pending charges of drug trafficking, and for the first time in 7 years, this prompted Guzman to escape his prison. After all, American imprisonment meant the end of everything. On January 19, 2001, El Chapo's electronically secured prison cell was opened. Rumor has it, he was escorted by a prison guard outside of Puente Grande as he hid in the laundry cart. The security cameras were disabled in the location, and El Chapo was a free man.
Francisco Camberos Rivera, known as El Chito, or the Silent One, opened the door to El Chapo's cell and helped him climb into a cart of dirty laundry. They headed down unguarded hallways and through wide-open electronic doors to the inner parking lot, where only one guard was on duty. El Chapo jumped out of the cart and leapt into the trunk of a Chevrolet Monte Carlo. El Chito started it up and drove him to freedom.
It's reported that the escape cost $2.5 million in bribes to prison officials and officers. One prison guard who refused to help him escape was found murdered 7 years later. Joaquin Guzman spent the next 13 years on the run. He hid out in the Sierra Madre Mountains, running his empire while a huge manhunt didn't amount to anything substantial. With time, he grew more powerful. He started to come out in public. Every now and then, he would come out of hiding to dine at nearby restaurants.
The choreography was always the same. Diners would be startled by a team of gunmen, who would politely but firmly demand their telephones, promising that they would be returned at the end of the evening. Chapo and his entourage would come in and feast on shrimp and steak, then thank the other diners for their forbearance, return the telephones, pick up the tab for everyone, and head off into the night.
One time, he even attended a family reunion in Sinaloa. In 2009, the federal government of Mexico offered up to 30 million Mexican pesos to anyone who could provide information that could lead to Guzman's arrest. Additionally, the United States government offered up to $5 million for his arrest and conviction. Still, not much came of these monetary rewards either. As time passed, El Chapo started to get bolder and bolder in hiding. Guzman's exact location was unknown, but it was heavily suspected that he was hiding in the Golden Circle in the Sierra Madre region. Apparently, the boss has a very sophisticated security circle with at least 300 informants and gunmen, also resembling the manpower of the head of the state. His men helped him move through various isolated ranches in the mountains to evade capture. He had everything he needed to help him escape from the police officers: bulletproof cars, aircraft, all-terrain vehicles, as well as the very best weapons. It almost seemed like he could never be caught. In fact, his ability to run from law enforcement gave him a legendary place in Mexico's narco folklore. But 13 years after his escape, the police finally started to catch up with El Chapo. In November 2013, Serafin Zambada Ortiz, El Mayo's son, was arrested at the border crossing in Nogales, Arizona. His arrest allowed law enforcement to penetrate into Guzman's close circle. Weeks later, Mexican security forces gunned down Gonzalo Inzunza, commonly known as El Macho Prieto, a top leader in the Sinaloa cartel. 2 weeks after that, Jose Rodrigo Arachiga Gamboa, Guzman's hitman and a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel, was arrested in Amsterdam. With these top members behind bars, the cops finally started to understand how the cartel communicated. After loads of misinformation, arrests, wiretaps, and testimonies, law enforcement was finally able to get a location on El Chapo, a property in the Libertad neighborhood in Calyocan, but the door was steel reinforced and couldn't be broken down with heat, so the authorities came down on it hard for 10 minutes, which gave the narco lord enough time to escape through his hidden tunnel that connected with the entire sewage system of the city. In the streets, troops flooded the area to prevent Guzman from escaping. Drones were supervising the area, but the kingpin made his way through the sewage systems and once again escaped. On February 21st, 2014, soldiers of the Mexican Navy and agents from the DEA, the U.S. Marshal Service, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security were set up in Mazatlan. These officers managed to pinpoint the location of Guzman's bodyguard, Hu Ramirez's phone signal, which led them to Hotel Miramar, a fancy beach resort in the city. 6 soldiers made their way to an apartment on the 4th floor where Ramirez was guarding the area, but he surrendered his weapon as he was outnumbered. Inside, the soldiers found Guzman's babysitter and his 2 daughters in one of the rooms. In the master bedroom, they discovered El Chapo and his wife. No shots were fired. Within 3 minutes of the raid, the narco's lord was arrested. At the time of his arrest, El Chapo was the world's most wanted criminal. He was taken to the Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1 in the city of Almoloya de Juarez, known as an inescapable fortress. But that reputation was quickly shattered. On July 11, 2015, Guzman escaped through a 1.5-kilometer tunnel found in his cell's shower. Once again, he was out in the open, but this time it wasn't for long. Operation Black Swan, the joint U.S. and Mexican-led military operation, were initiated to recapture El Chapo, and this time, no expense was spared. On January 6, 2016, Mexican naval forces moved to raid a house in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, where one of Guzman's top assassins was expected to be. As they entered the building, an intense shootout began, which left 5 cartel members dead and another 6 wounded. 1 Marine was also injured. In all this chaos, the officers found Guzman, who fled the house through a series of tunnels. He was attempting to escape in a stolen vehicle, but he was spotted by federal agents outside and caught one more time. On January 19, 2017, Joaquin Guzman Loera was extradited to the United States. He was turned over to the custody of HSI and DEA agents. He was kept at the maximum security wing of the Metropolitan Corrections Center in New York City. El Chapo was found guilty on various charges, including engaging in continuing criminal enterprise and conspiracy to manufacture and distribute coke, heroin, methamphetamines, and marijuana, and using a firearm in furtherance of substance-related crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 30 years. He was also ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion. Guzman was moved to ADX Florence, the most secure U.S. supermax prison. Life in there isn't pretty.
I knew when I was there, this was hell. The silence is deafening. They will shoot you with a regular bullet. No questions asked. I will guarantee you every single fucking person in the ADX Supermax would do anything to trade with Guantanamo Bay.
I don't know what hell is, but I do know that the assumption would be for a free person, would be pretty close to it.
Let's take a look at some of the other prisoners at the ADX. For starters, there's the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. If you don't know, he was a lone wolf who terrorized the United States for almost 20 years, sending people bombs in the mail. He had killed 3 people. Then, the ADX has Michael Swango. Swango was responsible for at least 60 fatal poisonings of his colleagues and patients. With prison mates like these, you can imagine what kind of security is needed to keep them there. And with Guzman's successful escape attempts in the past, he had to go to a place where it's impossible to escape. Located in the outskirts of Colorado, the ADX is an impenetrable fortress. Every corner of this prison is foolproof. While dealing with such high-level criminals, it's important that they have absolutely no way of escaping, and the ADX does just that. The walls are so high that no prisoner can guess the location of where they're staying. El Chapo is reportedly kept in a cell with a single slit in the wall. Because of the severity of his crimes, the Mexican narco king doesn't have access to a shower either. He gets a wash with a hose. ADX has different levels for different criminals, and range 13 is the most severe. As you can guess, that's exactly where Guzman is kept. There, he virtually has no human contact. His cell furniture includes a small desk stool and a bed made of concrete. Safe to say, the US government made sure that El Chapo doesn't even think of escaping. After all, no one has ever broken out of the ADX Supermax.
¿Usted cómo, qué tendría que decir del pueblo de México? Pues yo puedo decir que es normal que la gente piense de diferentes maneras porque pues, algunos me conocen y a los otros no y por eso no digo yo que es normal porque pues, las personas que no me conocen no tendrán sus dudas de decir si en este caso yo soy buena persona o mala.
And that's a wrap for this video. Goodbye and see you in the next one.